a smaller batch producer. We produce about 10,000 cases of wine a year, and we are family owned and operated. And one of our biggest claims to fame is that everything that we produce is made from estate fruit, which means everything we make comes from our very own vineyard. So with 60 acres, we plant 9 varieties. For red wines, which we're going to be highlighting today, red wines, we grow mostly Bordeaux varieties. And the Bordeaux grapes are Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, which you've probably had a lot of if you've had Niagara wine. Also Merlot. There's 2 other ones, we don't grow them, Petit Verdot and Malbec as well. Although we did plant some Malbec this past spring, so look for some of that. The owner of our winery is a gentleman named Lou Puglisi, and Lou, for his own tastes, he drinks a lot of California, a lot of West Coast wines. He likes big, bold, full-bodied wines. Lou's family has been grape growing in the Niagara region since 1974. So his father started planting a 10-acre plot of mixed fruit, peaches, table grapes, all that stuff. And he got into the grape growing business himself in his early 20s. He had all this money saved up to buy a Camaro. And his dad gave him some fatherly advice and told him to invest it in some land. So he bought an additional 20-acre plot of grapes and went into business with his dad and started farming. Back in 2008, Lou won the Grape King Award. And the Grape King is kind of like the biggest deal for a grape grower in Ontario. You're pretty much selected as the top grower in the province. So doing that, he got to do a lot of ambassador work for the grape growers of Ontario. He got to travel around Canada, meet grape growers in other climates, other regions, particularly on the West Coast and the Okanagan. And he got inspired by some of those small batch producers there and some of the fantastic wines they were making. So that's when the transition started. So a lot of people wonder why Niagara Reds tend to taste different. And a lot of it is tied into the climate and where we are producing these wines. So we are not California. We are not Chile. We are not Argentina. We are not Australia. So the wines we make are going to be different. Our growing season is shorter. Our winters are colder. And so we have to do a little bit of extra work to achieve those big alcohol levels, that full-bodied flavor, that extra intensity in our wine. So what we do in 2009 for the first wine is actually a great way to illustrate this. We actually had probably one of the toughest years that Niagara's ever seen. We didn't get bud break until late May, which means the growing season started very, very late. We had a lot of frost, we had a bad winter, and it pretty much rained all summer long. Now, when making red wines, the red wine grapes are usually harvested much later in the season, so you do need optimal temperatures for the full breadth of the season to make good reds in our region. And that's one of the difficulties. So 2009 was not easy, so we had to be very patient and very diligent. It requires a lot of vineyard work. In terms of quality and pricing in wine, one of the number one things that you can kind of tie together is yield. And what I mean by that is how much grapes that you grow in each section of vineyard, how concentrated those berries are. And one way to do that is through pruning and thinning your crops. If you produce smaller yields, you tend to get fuller bodied flavor, riper grapes, generally better wine, especially for, like I said, in a cooler region like our own. So what we did is we cut off more than 70% of the fruit out of our vineyard. So we got less than 1.5 tons an acre of grapes for 2009. And on top of that, we had to be very patient. So we actually waited until November 16th before we harvested grapes. Now, most of you are probably from Ontario, and you know that November 16th is not exactly optimal, sunny, fruit-growing weather, and it wasn't. We had a good stretch of weather from September to early October, which saved our whole crop, but making these wines still cost us a lot. So in the end, what we did is we harvested our Cabernet Franc grapes for our first vintage release. They were crushed and then fermented and left on skins for about almost a full month. And afterwards, we pressed the wines and aged it in French and American oak. Everything was brand new at this time. All the barrels we had were brand new. So we didn't leave this wine in barrel as long as we did some of our later ones. When you're treating a wine in oak barrels, how old the barrel is can have a direct relation to how intense that oak flavor is in the wine too. So the more you use them, it tends to be the less that you actually, that flavor you get, more neutral. Nowadays, once you have a more developed barrel program, you can kind of use a balance between older and newer wood to get the right flavor. And then at the end, the winemaker has the fun job of pretty much tasting through all of them and making a fun blend. The Cab Franc here was in brand new French and American oak, and it aged for about 14 months' time, which was perfect. To be honest, first time I visited Pondview was before I worked there, and we got an opportunity to taste this wine out of barrel, and it had only been in oak for about 8 months' time, and I thought it was ready. Like, it was absolutely gorgeous. We won, for this wine, double grand gold at the All Canadian Wine Championships, which is a pretty big competition in Canada done by Wine Access, and basically this wine won the top Cab Franc in the country. So we beat everyone in Ontario, and we beat everyone on the West Coast as well. So it was pretty impressive for us. It was our first really big award. Now, since then we've won 38 awards since we opened in just 2.5 years' time. As wines age, they actually will start to develop new flavors. The oak character in the wine will start to melt together nicely, and the tannins will begin to soften as well. A wine like this is also showing some sediment as well. So we tried to avoid getting that in your glass, but if you were to have an older wine like this, you would want to check the bottom for that deposit there. So on the nose, you'll notice Cab Franc is a variety that is usually used in blending in Bordeaux for aromatics because it has such a complex nose to it. Sometimes you get spicy aromas. You'll get hints of strawberry. You'll get sometimes earthy, almost like forest floor as the wine begins to age. Typically, Cab Franc on the palate is also known to be one of the Bordeaux varieties that has nice acidity, so you feel that little bite on your cheeks. Sometimes with red wine, that can be off-putting if you're just drinking it on its own, but keep in mind, red wine is designed to be had with food. The acidity you feel on your cheeks is something that's going to help cut through fat. It's going to match acidity in food. It's also going to just help to be kind of palate cleansing. It's refreshing when you're eating. And it also helps in age. The main preservatives in a red wine are your tannins. The acidity in the wine is also going to help. And the alcohol helps to keep it stable over time, too. So if the wine's got good acidity, good tannins, lots of flavor, lots of fruit, it can keep. Cab Franc is usually good for midterm aging, so usually 4 to 6 years for a good quality Niagara Cab Franc is going to be just the right time. And we cracked the bottle of this a few weeks ago, and I thought it was tasting pretty fantastic. So in 2010, as I mentioned, we did have a little bit of an easier growing season that year. But the heat and the intensity we had that year were pretty much off the charts. In wine regions around the world, we measure how hot our climate is with a statistic which called growing degree days. And that statistic is calculated by the amount of days we have in a growing season that are above 10 degrees Celsius. So ours, we're a little bit warmer than New Zealand, a little bit cooler than Bordeaux, a little bit warmer than Burgundy. We kind of fit into that area. In 2010, we were above the annual average for Napa. So it gives you some perspective in what we had to work with. So we decided to make a more wide range of reds. We've never made a varietal Cabernet Sauvignon either, so that was the first season we tried that. Now, the Cab Franc in the next glass is the biggest wine we've ever made. And when I say that, more full-bodied, more intense. We used the same philosophy as we did in 2009 by allowing the fruit to ripen, leaving them on the vine, low yields again. And even in a warm year like 2010, we waited till November 8th to pick the fruit. So again, that ended up giving us that flavor we want. Now, this wine spent a bit more time in oak. We left them in barrel for about 16 months. We also incorporated some Hungarian oak into the use in the barrels. Now, people have heard of French and American oak. Hungarian oak is a little less common. It's kind of the best of both worlds, to be honest with you. French oak is known for being very tight-grained, but it doesn't provide as intense an oak flavor to the wine, but it has lots of oak tannin, so it helps to contribute to stabilizing the color in the wine as well as allowing it to age for long term. American oak, on the other hand, is lower in tannins, but it's a more porous wood, so you get a lot of flavor. Wines aged in American oak tend to be really intense, really oaky, so you tend to want to balance them out a bit. Hungarian oak is tight-grained like French oak, but it has lower tannins like American. So we usually use it for whites, but we wanted to add a nice soft mouthfeel to this wine, so part of the wine was also aged in some brand new Hungarian oak, as well as a mix of 1- and 2-year-old French and American. And after, again, this is another wine that we thought we probably drank a barrel of before we actually bottled it. we get an opportunity to sample these wines as they progress, and I think we bottled it at the perfect time. Cab Franc as a variety, I think, is probably, for heavy reds, is probably the most well-suited to the region. It ripens early enough in the season, usually a few weeks into October. It's ready for harvest, and again, this one is a monster. So you're going to get some of those kind of spicy notes, you get some of that pepperiness, but also you get that chocolate, that coffee note to it as well, and a little bit of sweetness from the oak. When we talk about body in wines, the number one contributing feeling to body is alcohol. That gives that wine that viscous feeling, that dense feeling. So this wine feels like a mouthful. You can almost chew it. And the color is definitely dense as well. Again, another wine that would age beautifully for about 4 to 6 years. Probably longer, but I always think it's better to drink it too young than to drink it too old. So the next wine in your lineup there is probably the toughest red wine variety to grow in the Niagara region, which is one you'll see commonly, actually, made from Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, a lot of people call Cabernet Sauvignon the king of red wine grapes. It is really ideally made to make beautiful red wines that have really long-term aging. The makeup of the variety, the skins are very thick, so it's a very tough grape. So that provides a lot of tannins, a lot of color extraction, a lot of flavors and aromas as well. But the only problem with it is it does take a lot longer to ripen. Even in a good year here, we're harvesting it usually well after it cools down. You look at the regions that in the world that are known for Cabernet Sauvignon, you think Coonawarra in Australia, you think of California, Bordeaux as well. It's typically grown in climates that are a little warmer, and in cooler climates you usually grow it alongside Merlot and Cabernet Franc as well, so that you can use them to make blends in case the season doesn't pan out the way you want it to. But when it's done right, it can make definitely one of the best styles of red wine that you can purchase, especially if you're into aging. So this 2010 Cab Sauv is an absolute beaut. Probably my favorite wine in the flight, other than the 09, that we have here. I gotta pick favorites. But again, it was harvested much like the Cab Franc in the second week of November in 2010, and after hand harvesting, this wine spent about 18 months in French and American oak in terms of aging, and it wasn't really rocket science. This wine kind of made itself. The blending was 50-50. We just put it all together. We left about 5 cases of it unfiltered that I don't know what happened to. I never got any. But it's a wine that will age easily for 10 years. Another reason for that is the acidity that you get in Cabernet Sauvignon is just beautifully balanced. Lots of fruit. The aromatics are a little more complex than I find them with the Cab Franc, but you get more almost like kind of cassis, that kind of almost like eucalyptus, but you get that currant aroma as well, which is classic. You get some of that smokiness, some of that spiciness that you get with a lot of Niagara Reds as well, which is just indicative of our terroir here. But again, all those tannins. But the thing about Cab Sauv is the tannins are much silkier. They're much smoother. They're almost like sandy, almost, just very mild. They're not coarse and rough and, make your mouth feel like you've had all the saliva sucked out of it. So, again, this wine demands steak, rare red meat. You don't need anything too fatty. I can drink it on its own, but if you're pouring a wine like this, it's something that you're going to want to decant for a while. How many people here decant their red wines at home? Very good. Very good. Especially younger reds. Very important to do. Decanting helps in a number of ways. Of course, it helps to smooth the wine out. I'm a wine geek, so I like to watch the wine kind of progress. So I'll pour a bit, I'll have a little bit after half hour, a little bit a half hour later, see how it's opening up, how it's changing, how it's breathing. The last wine in the flight there, guys, is our most expensive, but it's also one that I mentioned we made at about 9:30 in the morning with that tasting on a Monday. We decided that we were going to make a Meritage style blend. I think Meritage is probably the most misunderstood term. Living in Canada, I notice everybody loves to call it Meritage because it sounds nicer if you put a little accent on it, but it's actually an American word, so it's Meritage. It's actually a combination of the words merit and heritage. I'm not even kidding. It was developed in California, and it was developed for a blend using Bordeaux varieties of any kind. So ours is a little difficult a little different than the most common style. It's actually a mixture of Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc exclusively. We didn't put Merlot in because our Merlot vines were very young, and we didn't feel like the wines that we produced out of it would have fit into a blend like this. This one is designed for super long-term aging. It spent the longest in oak, and we picked the best barrels of each, of the Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc in the blend. It's 100% French oak as well, so we only use the expensive stuff. And I think the end result makes it one of the most beautiful wines we've made. But again, it's still a baby. It definitely needs to mature a little bit. I mean, this one we ballpark 10 to 12 years. It will hit its peak. But it's again, this wine we retail for about $40 a bottle. So if you're drinking it now, definitely give it some love. Put it in a decanter. Let it breathe a little bit, because it will soften out. I've worked in the wine industry in Niagara for about almost 9 years now. It's something I've loved and I've grown a great passion for. I got my sommelier when I was 23 years old, but on the other hand, I learned most of what I know about wine and most of my appreciation for it, not in a classroom, but just through experimenting and trying new things. And I still run into people who tell me Ontario wine tastes like turpentine. I had a man at the grocery store, like not long ago, telling me, and my parents, they always tell me about the Grape and Wine Festival in Niagara when they were younger, and they would sneak in rum and Coke rather than drinking the wineskins that they would sell, because it was just that much better. But we really have gotten much better at doing what we do. And part of it is we have a better understanding of the area. I think we're growing grape varieties that are more suited to our climate. But more than anything, I think our grape growers in this region have developed a thick skin, so to speak, no pun intended, because it's such an extreme region to produce wine with so many different hurdles that it made them that much better. And the competition is getting better every year too. So I think Ontario consumers who are buying more and more VQA wine we don't have the patience for that lower quality anymore. And I think in terms of a high-end product, I think we can make some beautiful red wines. Whether it be from Pinot Noir all the way up to Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, Meritage blends. I think you're going to see that bar get even higher in years to come. So I hope you guys have enjoyed these wines. I placed a tasting card for complimentary tasting at the winery. If anyone wants to order wine from us, if you don't live in the area, we do free shipping on a case of wine as well if you're interested. But more importantly, I think you guys should just come see us. We're located down on Line 2 in Niagara-on-the-Lake. We're right in Virgil area, in the 4 Mile Creek growing area. And we're friendly. We're open 8 days a week, 10 to 6. Yeah, we invented an extra day just so we can work more. Come see us. It's a friendly bunch, and we got a whole variety of wines. It's not just this. We make beautiful Chardonnays, beautiful Riesling, aromatic white blends, as well as big reds, and delicious ice wine. And we actually do chocolate ice wine shooters, too, which are a lot of fun. So cheers, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed our wines. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I've got some more wine to drink, so I'll be here for a few minutes.